I believe we're at the Mishnah. I don't know this. No, we are at the Mishnah. The first Mishnah on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. I was on Chaf Beis Amud Beis. I'm like, this doesn't look. So we're 21b3, the first Mishnah. Oh, so I think a week or two ago I mentioned that there's something called mitoch and something called hoel. And then we said it's because you're allowed to do it for this, you're allowed to do it for that also. Let's say because you're allowed to uh well, that may not be the reason, but since let's say you have a kid, so you have to cook something for your kid, once you're allowed to cook for him, you cook a little extra. It's not exactly we talked about it. We saw. So I was looking a week or two ago. I said this Hoel that is mentioned seems to be similar to me talk, but it has a different word. So it does seem to be different properties that some Rishonim say they're similar, and some say they're not similar at all. They just happen to look similar, but based on completely different principles. So I just want to give a correction on that. Okay. So the top Mishnah on Chafal from a base. Beishamai Omrim lo yachem adam chamin lo raglav. You're not allowed to warm uh water to wash your feet. Elim kinrin l'shtia. Unless the water can be, you're able to drink the water, meaning it's clean enough that you would drink it. Because I guess in those days you'd have to, if you wanted water, you have to bring it from the well. So water to wash your feet didn't need to be that clean. You weren't, eating your feet. But so water that was maybe used for a few other things first, it would still be clean enough to wash your feet, but not necessarily clean enough to wash it. So Beishamai to drink. So Beishamai says water like that you're not allowed to heat up on Yantif to wash your feet. Or you're only able to heat up water to wash your feet if it's clean enough to drink. Because since it could have a food purpose to drink, make it use it for coffee, or, tea, something like that. Uh, but if it's not possible for to be edible, so Beis Shammai is only literal is strict and saying you could only warm it up if you could possibly consume it. So if it's water that's not clean enough to eat, you're not allowed to warm it up to wash your feet. Elim kinrin l'shtia. Uveitz Hillel matir. Beis Hillel allows it. Adamos medur mischamim connecta. And a person can make a big fire and warm yourself up. So obviously from this halacha, and it's mentioned in footnote 22, is that you're not allowed, even Beis Hillel agrees, you're not allowed to warm up water to do a whole bath, a whole shower, because uh, that so uh, something which was you're only able to do something which is shavel chaladim that everyone likes. So not everyone cares to bathe their whole body, at least in that time. So you're not allowed to warm up water for to wash your whole body, just for a part of your body. And I think I don't remember the details. It's been a very long time. I never fully had them, but according to this, there was something called mugmar, which was some type of spice. I don't think you wouldn't be allowed to do mugmar, so meaning you warm something up and it smelled good, but you wouldn't be allowed to do that on Yantif either because a lot of people don't care for that smell or they don't have a sense of smell. So that's not something that's shavel chol nefesh that the vast majority of people would like it. So that's not allowed on Yantif. And there used to be, I haven't seen this in at least I would say more than 30 years, people smoking on Yantif. Um, well, one problem is that there people are used to not they're not used to well, if they're chain smokers, I never saw a real chain smoker. But if they're a chain smoker, you're not you're lighting it from an existing thing. Obviously, for those that if it would be so, I mean nowadays we know that it's dangerous, so you can't smoke at all. So you can't smoke at either, and that might be part of the reason why I don't see people smoking on Yantif anymore. But I mean, I saw it in the It was well before I came to Skokie.
We were young, that was, a lot of people smoke. Oh,
Not
yeah,
it's not so
Larry said in Israel still.
on Yontif. I never saw it I didn't see it in Israel on Yontif when I was there. But
I have seen, yeah. It's just in the state. Then again,
right, no, that's
I
true.
haven't been in, certain neighborhoods. But,
Right. So I mean, if people are so used to smoking, they'd have to hide their matches and lighters and stuff to make sure that they wouldn't. But if you have a candle at the ready, if an existing flame, so according to some opinions, it's possibly motor. Now, uh, a friend of Ramosha, Rabbi Stanley Krantman, from St. who lives in St. Louis, or he did. I don't know if he moved out of St. Louis since COVID, but he told me, and he was right, but I don't remember the details. If you smoke on Shabbos, I mean, if you hold it, you could smoke on Yantif. You're not allowed to take a shower on Yantif, and if you hold it, you can take a shower on Yantif. You can't smoke on Shabbos. But based on the Heterim, you can't have both ways because they somehow they use opposite principles. So
if you're married to a smoker, though, you want them to take a shower.
So the Gemara says, "Hi Medura Ibailahu." They had a question. Hi Medura Man Katanila. This halacha about the making a big fire. Who is that? Who's the author of that part of the Mishnah? Divrei Kol he is that. Does everyone agree? Because first we had Machlokas Beisham Bebeisel. Then the last phrase was you're allowed to make a big fire to warm yourself up. So is this divrei hakol? Is that does Beishama even agree to that halacha? V'shani luhula Beishama ben hanos kol guf alanos ever echad, and Beishama distinguishes between making your entire body feel good by getting warm, that they would allow that, versus only washing your feet, that they prohibit you from warming up the water to wash your feet if it's not edible, potable water. Lahanos ever echad. Oh, Dilma Beis Hillel Tanila Avo Beis Shammai Lo Shanilu. Or is that last phrase only according to Beis Hillel? According to Beis Hillel, you can make the big fire to warm your whole body up, but Beis Shammai holds that's also usher. So Tashma, we learned in a brisa, Beis Shammai Omrim Lo Yasa Adam Madur V'Yitzchamim Kenegda. Your person is not allowed to make a big fire and warm his whole body up by the fire. Beis Hillel Matir and Beis Hillel allows it. So therefore, we see that the last phrase in the Mishnah is only according to Beis Hillel. Okay, next Mishnah. Shlosh Dvarim, Rabbi Gamliel Machmak Divi Reishame. There were three things that Rabbi Gamliel was strict, like Reishame's opinion. Ain Tomnes Achamin L'Chadchila B'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to insulate hot food. Article says that it's water, but I don't know why it would only be water. You can't insulate food L'Chadchila on Yantif for Shabbos. So the Gemara is going to say, is that with an Erev Tavshon or not with an Erev Tavshon? Vein Zokvin as Hamnor Yom Tov. You can't straighten a candlestick on Yom Tov. Vein Ofen Pit and Greets and El Rakikin. You're not allowed to make thick bread on Shabbos. You only have to make thin bread on Shabbos.
Yom Tov.
On Yom Tov, excuse me. Right. Can't do any of these on Shabbos. On Yom Tov. Thick. Right. The way basically he said when you bake on Yom Tov, you have to make it like matzahs. Thin. Now in his day, they probably didn't make matzahs as thin as our matzahs are. They're probably more like the Taimani, the Yemenite matzah, but not to make big, thick. He said Rashi says that to make these thick loaves it involves more work. What that is, I don't know. But then again, they didn't have packets of yeast in those days. What? Meaning he was strict. That he was strict that according to Beis Shammai, you're only allowed to make thin bread on Yontif. not thick bread on Yantif. Rashi says that it was a bigger pachka to make thick bread. Amrulo, other chachamim said to him, "Manas avicha, what are we doing with your father's house?" Meaning the house of the descendants, the family of Hillel, the descendants of Hillel. They were strict for themselves not to do these things. But they were makel, they were lenient for everyone else. They also often pizza and greets and charar. They were able to make thick loaves of bread, and Artsco says, "Oh yeah, she'ofen al gachalim." So a few years ago, I was at a certain place, and for a carnival type thing, and they were baking pitas over like a fire pit. So I don't know if that's meaning these hararin, because a harara is also like a coal. So Rashi says that you bake the bread on a coal. So I mean, obviously, it wasn't literally on a coal, but 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 the response of these chachamim to Rabbi Gamliel was, excuse me, yeah, Rabbi Gamliel. He's like, you could be machmer, but your father, your grandfather, they may have personally kept the chumrah, but they were they held for everyone else it was mutter, but it was a personal chumrah, at least in regard to for the bread. It doesn't say about the first two things. They only seem to be responding about the bread. Okay, Gemara. Hepidami. So the first case that Beis Shammai doesn't allow you to insulate food on Yantif for Shabbos. What's the case? Id an erev tafshilin. If you made an erev tafshilin, my time at Beis Shammai. What's the reason for Beis Shammai to prohibit it? You're even able to cook. So if you're able to cook, you could also insulate. Vidal and erev tafshilin, my time at Beis Hillel. And if you didn't make an erev tafshilin, why Beis Shammai's opinion makes a lot of sense, and why would Beis Hillel disagree with them and say you are allowed to insulate the food if you didn't make an erev tafshilin? Now in the Gemara, there's two types of insulation. There's an insulation that just keeps things insulated, but then they also had a different thing that they actually had like coals embedded in this material, and it didn't just insulate, it also kept it. It also was adding a little bit of heat to it. So clearly, I would say that for this is obviously talking about the case where you're insulating that has the coals in there that keep it hotter. Meaning let's say we have some crack pot. Some crack pots come with the insulated bag. So that's not there's no problem of using that because that's not adding any heat. It's just trying to retain it. It's like putting a towel around it. So there's no way that's awesome. But there was a time in the time of the Gemara, there was a type of insulation of hatmana, which we translated in insulation. There were pieces of coal embedded in this material that I don't know if it could be that they like put it on the ground and they had dirt or sand on the ground with coals and they would heap it up around the pot, something like that. So that wasn't just it's not just wrapping around a towel around it to retain the heat, but because there's coals there, it's making it warmer. So we're clearly talking about a case like that. So Rav Huna says, we're talking about a case with someone who didn't have an erev tafshilin. So why does Beis Hillel allow you to do it? The Chachamim allowed you to do the minimum for what you need for Shabbos. K'dei chayav literally means according to your life. So I mean, you're not going to starve to death in a day either, but it means we allow you the minimum. Rav Huna latemei, and Rav Huna follows his own reasoning from a different halacha. Rav Huna says, if someone didn't leave erev tafshilin, often lo pasachad, other people could bake for him one loaf of bread. They can make one cooked food for him. And they can light a candle for him. Umishum Rabbi Yitzchak amru, for him meaning in his house. They light a candle in his house. I mean, they could light a candle for him in their house, but it's not going to help him. So it's talking about light a candle in his house. Umishum Rabbi Yitzchak amru, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, they said, Avtzolin lo dakatan, they could also roast a little fish for him. Tani nami hachi, So I don't know if this is because there is it seems to be based on the Kabbalah that it's important to eat fish on Shabbos. I don't know if it applies to Yom Tov. Oh, yeah, so probably based on that because we're talking about if he didn't make it after Shem. So you can even roast a little fish for him. Tani nami hachi. We learned in the Beitza like this. Mi shelo hinech eruve tavshilin. Ofin lo pasachad. If someone didn't leave a erev tavshilin, we could bake a loaf of bread for him. The Talmud look der achas, and you could insulate a pot for him. So the line that we just said, it was on the previous Amud, it says we can cook for him one pot, and this says Tomlin, you can insulate, but again, it's an insulate that's adding heat. Malikalo near echad, and you can light one candle for him. Lo kiton echad, and you can warm one jug of water for him. V'yesh omer mafton and lo dog cotton. Some say you could also roast a small fish. So this is talking about someone who did not make an erev tavshalom. So we saw that the person who is negligent loses his ability to be included in that. So we're talking about a case where they didn't have someone making a blanket erev tavshalom for him.
Or those negligent person still can cook.
No, some other people would have to cook for him.
Well,
Neighbors, friends, frenemies, the local chesed committee. I mean, it happens to be. I don't know how often people, you know, I don't know how often people invited guests over because that would be another solution, right? I can cook, so I'll invite you over and you could eat from my food, and I'm allowed to invite you and cook for you. So I mean, the Gemara in Megillah talks about Rav Zera and Rav Huna maybe that it seems they one of them ate with each other the Perm Suda every year. They've switched off going to this one's house or that one's house. But I mean, according to what the way we have think though, there's a simple solution. I'll invite you over to my house, but that doesn't seem to have been the way they worked in the Gemara. And then just a separate point we mentioned a few months ago already, probably about we when we spoke about this based it, I think it seems we paskin for Rabbeinu Tam, but we have pas, bread or matzah, and a cooked food in our erev tavshalin. We mentioned that the Beis Shammai's opinion is if you want to cook something with a watery cooking, you would need a cooked food. If you want to roast something, you need a roasted food. And if you want to bake something, you need a baked food. So Rabbeinu Tam seems to hold even Beis Hillel agrees that we need a pas and bishul, but it seems that with that Beis Hillel agrees with cooked food that includes roasting and stuff also. And Beis Shammai, so I'm just saying when we say here eruve tafshil, that the Brisa and the Gemara was using the term eruve tafshil in a plural. Why is it plural? It might be because we need to have at least the baked thing and a cooked thing, even especially according to Rabbeinu Tam, there's no problem with the Gemara saying that. According to other opinions that Beis Hillel literally would hold, you could have one cooked thing and that includes baking and cooking and roasting also. Why does the Gemara use the word eruve? Because what's the plural? What's more than one? So I'm just saying a very close reading of this, I think would help. It makes sense if we paskin the way Rabbeinu Tam does.
it doesn't work. Like bread and
That's what I'm saying. That even though we learned in Mishnah earlier that Beis Hillel says you only need one, but Rabbeinu Tam said based on some other brises that we have or Gemara statements, not from a Mishnah, we should have a baked thing and a cooked thing, but we don't need a baked, cooked, and roasted.
one
Right, so hard-boiled egg
or-
and matzah or bread. Right. And I'm saying we're using the word plural, eruve. So plural would, but according, well, we discussed about no that. So there was a Mishnah that Beis Shammai says you need one for baking, one for dry heat, one for wet heat cooking, and Beis Hillel says no, one works for everything. But Rabbeinu Tam said, I think it's Rabbeinu Tam, and it said based on other Gemaras that even though we possibly Rabbeinu Tam like Beis Hillel, we also need to have a baked thing and a cooked thing, either roasted or boiled, or not literally, but you're right. According to Beis Shammai, you would need three things. Rava Amar. So the first opinion is that you didn't make an Erev Tavshilin, and Beis Hillel is lenient for K'dei Chayev. Rava Amar Liolam Sheniach, you did make an Erev Tavshilin. So if so, why doesn't Beis Shammai allow you to do this installation? V'shari Hadmana, this installation is different. Demucha Milsa Dadat Tishabsa Ka'avid. Because the fact that you're insulating shows you're not using it, you're not going to use it on Yantif. And since the point of Erev Tavshilin is that your Shabbos preparation started before Shabbos, or at least, and then there's a chance that you could eat it on Yantif, on Friday before. The fact that you're packing it up hours before, well, we see a couple things. We see that they didn't seem to reheat their leftovers and cook it. So it seems when they cooked, let's say the something that they wanted to leave for the next day, let's say maybe a cholent type thing, so they would cook it before Shabbos and insulate it with the coal included insulation. Whereas the way that we would insulate things now, so meaning it seems to maybe have been a process. So you were going to insulate it was going to be like that for a long time until you were going to use it. So there was, if you're cooking this and you're cooking it now and you're insulating it now, which also means you're not going to be taking from it because I guess you're insulating the top also, so you can't like take the top off of the pot. So because we see that there's no chance that you're going to eat it on Yantif, it shows that you're not planning on eat this for Yantif. So it kind of undoes the part of the idea of what an Erev Tavshilin is all about. So there's no problem of making Erev Tavshilin and cooking on Yantif to Shabbos. But if you're cooking it in a way where we see that you're not going to eat any of this on Yantif, and there's no possibility that you're going to eat it on Yantif, then you're doing the opposite of the spirit of the Erev Tavshilin. So you're not allowed to do that, even according to Beis Hillel. We're going to need another Erev Tavshilin because it's Thursday, Friday. And in Israel also they'll need it. I mean, it starts Thursday night. It's right, it starts Thursday night, right? So Friday, Shabbos. So,
if let's say we have storm,
yeah,
on Friday,
yeah.
can we use it?
Yeah, so I'm saying our Hatmana is different. The way that we cook and leave things is different than in those days. Has nothing to do with milchiks. Just
No, I mean, because the second day of Shavuos on Shabbos.
right.
If it's not, okay,
Well, in Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be the same thing. For Pesach, it was different. For Pesach, we needed to make an Erev Tavshilin because Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, and in Israel, Friday was Chol Hamoed, so they didn't need an Erev Tavshilin. This is going to be hard for them because they don't make Erev Tavshilin as often as we do. Not serious.
No.
They would make it in a situation like this. They would do it for a situation like this, or sometimes the eighth day of Pesach is on Shabbos. So the seventh, so meaning if Pesach starts on a Saturday night, then we have a Friday, Shabbos, last 2 days of, and in Israel they're stuck. They can't eat chametz on the last day of Pesach, because they can't get any chametz because Pesach ends Friday night, goes into Shabbos. So then they have to keep an 8 day Pesach also. So they would need to make an Erev Tavshilin then. And also, and for Rosh Hashanah could be started on a Wednesday night. But we have more opportunities at Chutzor to make an Erev Tavshilin. Like we just had on Pesach. Israel didn't, but for Shavuos, we all will. We in the same boat. Abaye, Abaye did not like this explanation of Rava. Rava is saying that when you insulate the pot like this, you're showing that you're not going to eat it on Shabbos on Yantif at all, and so it's destroying the spirit of the Erev Tavshilin. So Abaye asked Hananya Amar, there's a brisa. Hananya was a Tana, and he said, Beishamay Omer Menofen Elin Kain Erev Bafas. You're not allowed to bake on Yantif for Shabbos unless you made an Erev Tavshilin with pas, with bread or matzah. Beim Navashan, we saw this before. This is what I was talking about. That was on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Amid Beis. Ve'im Navashan Lekin Ir B'Tavshin. You're not allowed to cook in a moist environment unless you made a moistly cooked food as your Erev Tavshilin. Ve'im Tomnin Lekin Yilacham Tunim Erev Yantif. And you're not allowed to insulate on Yantif to Shabbos unless you already insulated something from Erev Yantif to use on Yantif. So you made two chalans. You made a chalan on Erev Yantif to eat on the first day of Yantif, which kind of defeats the purpose. We're allowed to cook on Yantif, for Simchas Yantif, and you decide, oh, I'm not going to cook. I'm going to make a chump beforehand and insulate it with the coals. What? Right. So some people, maybe they'll make a fish chowder chalent. If they don't want to have fleishik, but they want to have chalent on Shavuos, they can make a fish chowder chalent. We mentioned a few minutes ago that there seems to be an Indian from the Kabbalah to eat fish on Shabbos. So we mentioned here that on the second line in the Gemara, someone who didn't make an Erev Tavshilin, Rav Yitzchak, the Tanakama says you just make him you could make him one loaf of bread and one food, and Rav Yitzchak says you're also allowed to roast a small fish for him. They said, what's the significance of the small fish? So, according to the Kabbalah, there's an important thing to eat fish on Shabbos. So even though he didn't make an Erev Tavshilin, someone else is allowed to make a small fish for him on Shabbos so he could have the. Do you think it has to do with Ayin Hara? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So that's a proof that one of the special things. I mean, Rabbi Eugene mentioned it's mentioned other things that the way to celebrate Shabbos is through Torah. That's what you're saying. Okay, that's what follows according to what you're saying. But there's another opinion about with
I did say before, the Lag BaOmer is because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that's the end of day. And he published the book, which is had the biggest secret of the Torah, small book, within all the other books, in order to release the Magifa, so the students will stop that. And it shows also to read that that's what was together. He stopped the Machiur time.
mm-hmm.
In order to stop the Magifa, he chose the day and picked the perfection and he decided to leave. And on that day, which was a day and a night, one of the books of the Zohar is the biggest secrets of the Torah. And he released the book, which is releasing the energy to stop the Magifa.
Oh, to stop it. Okay.
That's what the book. The reason why they had fire, because when he came to the evening, and he didn't finish doing it, he didn't finish until the morning, he told the sun to stop, and the moon too, like it happened with
Yehoshua, the Gilgal.
The sun was all night long with that.
Mm-hmm.
The fire is to be like the sun having light all night long.
Mm-hmm.
Period. That's like bomb. Nothing to do with the roots of tree.
So from this brisa of Chananya, that you're not allowed to insulate on Yantif for Shabbos unless you did an Erev Tavshilin with an insulated food from Erev Yantif to Yantif. So the implication of the brisa is hayu lacham tmunin miu avid. if you did insulate something before Yantif, you're allowed to insulate things for Shabbos. V'afagav demucha milsa dadat Shabbos ka'avid. Even though we know that you're clearly insulating this pot for for Shabbos. So because Hananya says, Beis Shammai says that if you insulated a pot before Yantif, if as part of your Erev Tavshun, you're allowed to insulate a pot on Yantif for Shabbos. So we see that we're not worried about the fact that you're breaking the spirit of the Erev Tavshilin, that you're cooking something that you have no chance of eating on Yantif. So yeah, hatmana, but with gechalim. Because if you're just wrapping a towel around it, you're not cooking, you're not doing any malacha. So in the time of the Gemara, there was two types of hatmana. There's hatmana shemosifim chol, is what the word the Gemara says, and hatmana shalom she'ena mosifim chol. So the hatmana shemosifim chol had some type of coals. It must have been in like with like a sand or something, and they probably like kind of buried the pot in it or something. So that because there were coals in it, it was keeping the heating process going. So that's not similar to our, like I mentioned before you came in, that some of our crock pots have an insulated thing. So that's not hatmana, that's aser, because that's not adding any heat. That's just retaining heat that's already there. And that's not what this is talking about. This is definitely talking about a case where it's cooking more. There's more heat by this process. So Elam Abaye says a different reason. Abaye erev lozev lo erev bazeh. So you made an an eruv for cooking and baking v'lo erev lozeh, but you didn't make an erev tavshon for hatmana. V'chanani he v'liba to Beis Shammai, and this was only according to Hanani's understanding of Beis Shammai. So you're not allowed to do a hadmana because Beis Shammai says each type of cooking you need to do an erev tavshon for baking, for cooking with moist, for roasting with dry, and hadmana also. The second thing is you can't straighten the menorah. So at this point the Gemara is saying, Rashi says it on the Mishnah, if it tipped over, are you allowed to just put the metal menorah back up? That's all. It fell over, and you're just picking it up. Micah Avid, why couldn't you? What did you do wrong if you would pick up the thing that fell? What's the wrong? So Amar Rav Chinana Bar Bisna, Rav Chinana Bar Bisna says, Hacha b'menorah shel chuyos askinan. It's a menorah that's made of pieces. So when it fell, the pieces came apart, and in order for you to put it back in, you have to click or whatever the pieces back together. Demechzi kabona. It looks like you're building on Yantif. And binyan and steer. Binyan is a malacha that's not related to food, so it's not at all permitted on Yantif. The Beis Shammai Savri, Beis Shammai hold yesh min b'kelim, and we saw this in the first parak about certain types of windows of the. This is one of the cases. The windows of the merchants. There was like a big board covering it, and they say, "Can you take it off and use it as like a serving platter?" So Beis Shammai says that if you would put it back up, it's binyan b'kelim, but then they were saying, but if it's connected to the house, maybe it's like a house, it's not keli. But that was one of the cases we saw this idea already. Beis Hillel says there's no building in utensils, there's no dismantling in regard to them. So that's why that's why Beis Shammai says you're not allowed to put up this candlestick. Now, I didn't think of this until just now. Let me find this document where I have this. Yeah, Beis Shammai says if so, we hold like Beis Hillel. We hold like Beis Hillel. Beit Hillel. Yeah. Right. I mean, when it's Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, it's much easier because it's almost always like Beis Hillel. But sometimes there could be a machloket amoraim within Beit Hillel. And that's the whole purpose of the Gemara. The Gemara is to see which opinion we follow. So there are some. The Gemara doesn't always say v'hilchata like this. So that's why we needed to Rishonim to tell us how the Gemara passes, because the Gemara doesn't always explicitly say what its conclusion is. And sometimes the Rif thinks it's one way, the Rosh thinks it's a different way, and the Rashba thinks it's this, and the Ramban says that. So
Well, these are Rishonim.
yeah.
And the Gemara will decide what.
No, so the point of the Gemara is to tell us how we pass the Psak Halacha. Except the Gemara doesn't always say this is the Psak Halacha. And then the way the Rishonim learn the Gemara, they don't always come to this. They don't always agree on which is the opinion we follow, or they agree we follow it, but one says that it's only in a very limited situation we follow that, and the other one holds it's in a broader sense. So okay, so it's important just to mention the general rule of the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Yosef Karo, he said he looked at three main poskim: the Rif, Rav Yitzchak Alfasi, who was like 2 generations before the Rambam, Morocco, Alfasi from Faz.
Second.
He's a Rishon, a very early Rishon.
Second.
What do you mean second? Tanaim from the Mishnah.
He's Rishonim, but he's the second one.
Oh, so in the back of a regular Gemara, we have the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, the Rishon. Then we have Achronim, Marsha, and other Achronim, and then the Rif is in the back. The Rif used to be its own book. Now they publish in the back, but it's of the Gemara, but it wasn't originally published in the back of the Gemara.
And the third one, he was inspired. He was, said the first one, and they moved to the third.
Well, it could be that some shorter Masechtot, there's more than one in the same volume. Like in a regular Gemara like this, there's 5 or from the first parak to the third parak.
Not third. First time.
I don't know what that means. But the way that the Shulchan Aruch, his general rule is he looked at how the Rif says the Psak Halacha is, how the Rambam is, and how the Rosh, the Rabbeinu Asher, and he would take the majority of those 3. In general, if 2 of them pass in a certain way, that's the way he passes it. That's the general rule. But then you'll see there's tons of time where we pass it like other Rishonim, Rabbeinu Tam, a Rashba, Ramban. I mean, there's many Rishonim, but that's the basis of the.
The Rishonim don't have an order.
What do you mean of Dorot?
First one.
So the same way in the Mishnah and in the Gemara that there were different generations, but okay, but so the Rishonim, there are earlier Rishonim and there's later Rishonim. So the Rif is one of the first Rishonim, one of the earlier, and Balei Tosfot were kind of the later. Rabbeinu Yitzchak Alfasi. Yeah.
I'm still with them. He was the second.
I don't know. He was one of the earlier ones. I'm not disagreeing, but I don't know who the first one would be. Oh, so here's so just about putting things together, Binyan Bekalim, Masira Kalim. Poskim do discuss, can you play with Legos? Now, nowadays they have very specific Lego sets. But I think when they were asked about it, they didn't have those yet, and they had a bunch of blacks. So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is quoted in Shmir Shabbos Telchasa. This is just from note. I'm not looking at it inside right now. And it says that he thinks adults should not play with Legos. But Rav Ovadia Yosef and the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Waldenberg, they felt that there wasn't a problem for even adults to play with Lego. So I don't know if it had to do with, let me see what the chapter is here, because I have it right here. 16, 19. Oh, wait. Never mind. Oh, so the chapter in Shmir Shabbos Telchos is about games. And You shouldn't make games through folding paper, what we would call origami nowadays. I assume my Hebrew isn't kipule niyar means folding papers to make like a ship or a hat. So it's the origami is what we call it now because it's like you're making a kli. So the author says I heard from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. It's not like before because they're oh. It's the wrong footnote. The wrong footnote in my notes. You shouldn't combine or separate toys that are made from pieces that could be made like to make a an airplane or a boat that are made from plastic pieces or metal or wood. So you're talking about Lego probably because the pieces get connected for the very um, precision and you keep them together for a long time. It says for kids things, you don't have to complain about it. So, so based on that, they say that Rav Shlomo Zalman says that that these things that click together and it can stick for a while, it's better not to. But the Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Ovadia Yosef, I didn't see those inside. They seem to say that's not a problem. Um, so I don't know if it's related to this idea of binyan b'kelim or not, but I thought it's worthwhile to mention that. But also in my days, we just had, we had Legos. You would put something else, you'd take it apart. Now they have very specific sets, so those are things that are going to be permanent. It's probably not necessarily the same thing because it's not going to be taken apart. Okay. Ula ikli lebei Rav Huna. Ula went to excuse me, lebei Rav Yehuda, to Rav Yehuda's house on Yantif. Kashamali zakaf le'lashraga. So Kam Shmami, the waiter, the butler, the worker in the house straightened the candle. So because of that, uh, Rashi says he thought that that it was tilted, so the oil he thought was going to extinguish the fire because it was getting low. So by straightening it, the 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 fire was going to last longer. I don't know. Art Scroll translation seems to be saying the opposite, but that's not what Rashi seems to be saying. They say that they're saying Rashi. I see Rashi saying the opposite. He wanted that the oil should be removed backwards and not follow after the wick and extinguish it. Okay. Esvei, Rabbi Yehuda Ula. So Rabbi Yehuda asked Ula, I know it seems to be a, I'm missing something. Hanos and Shema Banir, if someone adds oil into a lamp that's already lit, Chay Mishum Avir, your your malacha of mavir, of burning. This is talking about Shabbos. Kamistapik mimena, and if you remove oil from it, Chay Mishum Mechaber, you're being Mechal Shabbos because you're extinguishing it, you're causing it to go out earlier. So how could the uh the Shamish have done that? So Amarle Lavadaiti. So he says he didn't do it based on I would have if you would have asked me, I would have told him not to do it. I agree with you. But he did it on his own. Amarav Kanvashari. Rav says Canva is allowed. So let me, I forgot to check this up this morning. Now, but this is a different halacha l'maisa question, and that is, would you be allowed to adjust a timer, a mechanical timer? You have the pegs, whatever. It's related to this Gemara right here. We're running out of time here. Okay, so Neva is cutting or trimming a wick, like in this Gemara. So Rav says you're allowed to trim the wick so that it burns a little better. So I guess it's burning right now, but if you snip it in a way that's not going to extinguish it, it's gonna it's going to help the flame fly better. But this is mutter, I guess, because you're not adjusting, you're not literally adding fuel to the fire or taking away fuel from the fire. Um, so he says you're allowed to do that on Yantif. So, oh, and then a few lines down, what is this? I'm all confused. I'm remembering something that I'm not seeing here. Okay, there's another Gemara here. So it's talking about, it says, where is it? That you can't cut a candle in half on Shabbos. I mean, certainly not Shabbos, on Yantif. But, oh, I saw it in a Tosos. What was it? Sorry, oh, it's Tosfos. Tosfos on Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, where we have the third Tosfos says, so the fact that we said that if you're not allowed to take out oil from it. So Tosa says, well, why is that usher? For the fact that it makes it burn out faster, that's only a grama. It's only indirect. By removing the fuel, it's only indirect. So why would it be usher on Yantif? You're not allowed to extinguish a fire, but a grama of it on Yantif isn't prohibited. And even on Shabbos, it's only usher because at the moment that you're taking the oil out, you have to be extinguishing the flame a little bit. So therefore, Toso says, Kikavoy, when we can yesh lahatur. So I don't know what his answer is, but he says because of this, you're allowed to you have a big candle, and that was the French word, candela, a candle that's big and it's made out of wax to cut underneath because at the time you cut it, you're not. So meaning if you have a long candle, you can cut underneath, you can cut lower down, and then move that top somewhere else. Because in that case, you're not anywhere near the wick, so you're not causing any temporary, even temporary extinguishing. But and here's the part I'm reading Tosfos again. I'm understanding it in a different way. That's only to cut it with a fire, but with a knife, you're not allowed to, according to everyone, because there's a Mishnah later about cutting a light and to have two. So if you're using a fire to cut a candle, so the candle a wax candle has a wick in the middle. So what happens if you melt the middle away with a fire? The bottom, and you take that once you melt it and the top goes away, the bottom is probably going to stay lit, right? So on Yantif that's not a problem because you're allowed to transfer a fire. But it seems that you wouldn't just be able to cut it plain. You want to have two candles instead of one. So this is my second reading of Tosfos. I don't understand it the same way I understood the first time, but based on this, okay, we're late, but the idea of changing a timer is based on this. So Ramosha Feinstein seemed to not like timers at all, but he it seems he felt that you could set the timer just to turn the light on or off. Question is, if it was already on, can you move it to stay on longer? If it was off, can you move the peg to keep it off longer? He says absolutely not. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach seems to say that you can, but he says you could only move the peg if you want to keep it what it is now. So if it's on now and you want to keep it on longer, you could move the peg back so it stays on longer. If it's off now, you can move the peg so it stays off longer, but you can't make it turn on early, change the peg to turn it on earlier or to move the peg to turn it off earlier. If it's right now it's on, you can't change it. It's going to go off at 12. Now it's going to go off at 11. That's not okay. That's what they say in the name of Rav Shlomo Zalman. And he does say if there's a power outage, he's saying he seems to say you can adjust, you can turn it so that if the power comes on soon, it'll be close to what you wanted it to be if there wouldn't have been a power outage. So okay. But there is a chance that I will not be able to give share next week.